Hello and welcome again to Wisdom You Didn't Ask For but Suddenly Can't Lead Without. And I've got a great guest today and I'm really excited. Her name is JuliAnne Murphy and she is a fantastic marketing executive and leader who has worked in commercial real estate, among other things, working on projects like the Broncos Stadium in Denver, working on huge projects in Panama, and now working as a consultant, helping small businesses and large businesses to analytics and figuring out their sort of brand strategy and where they're going. She is admired by everybody who works with her and called a coach and a mentor, a true marketing partner, and even a secret weapon. She's also a two-time cancer survivor who has gone from surviving to thriving, and now she helps other women especially do the same. So who wouldn't want to talk to somebody like that? I certainly do. JuliAnne, are you with me? Are you here? Come in, let's talk. Hi.
Alan, good
morning. Good morning.
So great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Super excited. Here. Super excited.
So happy you're here. So happy you're here.
Thank you.
And thank you for saying yes. So,
oh gosh, absolutely.
We got a lot to talk about, and
we do.
You have also joked about your master's in conflict. And of course, our title today is really all about navigating conflict like a boss, which I know you have, and you've got the scars to prove it, and you've been there, done it, and got the hard hat. So we're going to dive into all of that. But for the benefit of those watching, could you maybe just kind of give us a little bit of your story, first of all, and before we dive in?
Yeah, of course. It's hard to condense a 30-year career into a couple minutes, but I'll do my best. Let's see. So I've been in marketing my entire career, which is kind of unusual, I think, for many people this day and age. I started out in marketing. I've been in a number of industries. I started banking, telecommunications, sports, government, real estate development, the last especially 22 or so years, and have been very fortunate to learn from amazing people, work on extremely fun, big projects, and really to have great mentors and coaches along the way that have helped me develop into the person that I am. We're going to be talking about a lot of that. Now, the work that I do as a consultant is I work with a number of companies on a project basis, as well as kind of a longer term basis. I help them figure out where the gaps are in their marketing and who they're trying to really reach and how they're reaching them or not effectively, and to fix that. That's kind of the bottom line of the work that I do now.
I love it. Well, maybe you can help us with WYDAF. Who knows?
I would be very honored to do that.
Wouldn't it be great to work together? I would love that.
Yeah.
Catherine's here. Good morning, Catherine.
Good morning, Catherine. I think Catherine is one of the reasons I found you originally, Alan. I'm not sure.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. Catherine was the person who kind of connected. And Karita is joining us from LA as well. So good morning, Karita.
Oh, it's early there.
It says LinkedIn user, but that's our friend Karita who's out there in LA and up very early. So
very early.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, Karita. So okay, so let's sort of start to get into it, because I know that you've got lots to share, lots of wisdom, and it's why I asked you here. Maybe if you could headline for us to kind of overlay what we're about to talk about, what do you consider to be the secrets of your really great success, JuliAnne?
There's a number of characteristics that I feel like have contributed greatly. Number one is resilience. Number two is perseverance. There's a big dose of patience in there as well, which is a piece of perseverance, but not everything. Flexibility also, and probably a belief that at the base of most people, there's a goodness. So I'm kind of that half glass full person versus empty. So I tend to believe that at the baseline of people, there is a goodness in them that it may be up to me to elicit the best of by how I'm being.
Okay, I can't wait to talk about that one.
It's a tricky one. I'll tell you, it
It's
is
a
a tricky
tricky
one.
one because not everybody's good, as we both know. But
Right? That's true.
it's you
That's
know,
true.
it's that sort of assume benign intent at least, right? So let's get into it. We have a new section in the show that's called "What's Your WYDAF?" So, JuliAnne, I'm going to ask you, what is your WYDAF?
The little ding. That's so love it. Okay, I'm a marketing person at heart. So Alan, I would say learning to navigate conflict is in your best interest, and it makes you hugely valuable as a person or an employee or as a consultant. That's my big WYDAF for what we're talking about today.
I could not agree with you more. And you know that I work as an executive coach. I know you do a lot of coaching as well, sort of as part of the work that you do. Talk to us about some of the situations that you find yourself in. Without, you don't have to name names, but just kind of give us some idea of kind of the conflicts that you maybe have had to deal with, and what's your philosophy on handling conflict?
So let me give you some few snapshots of stories over the years that have contributed to where I am now. Because I feel like, and many of these do have to do with specific. I want to be broad, and that this is not a broad stroke story that kind of paintbrushes certain people, whether gender or anything else. These were specific individuals. So, gosh, I wrote several down from a perspective standpoint. 20 years ago, one of my first in the workplace kind of big conflicts starts out small sometimes. So I'm just going to give you some snapshots. 20 years ago, I was on my first development project, real estate development, and the boss and I had gotten along really well. He was a few years older than me. He had been hugely successful. And one day there was something that I had done that he was not happy about. And he stormed into my office. I was in a meeting with a vendor, and he proceeded to tell me everything I'd done wrong in front of that vendor. And he totally dressed me down. It shocked me because we had a good relationship. I, of course, got pretty upset, not in front of him. But after the vendor left, of course, we all know that was inappropriate. After the vendor left, I went to his office and then, frankly, interrupted him and stood in his office and said this. And I didn't have any training at that point in time. So I want to clarify that. I said, what you did was totally disrespectful, and I expect you to apologize. And he said, I'm not using all kinds of expletives. I'm not going to apologize. Get out of my office. And I sat down. I said, no, I'm not leaving until you apologize. Now, this was really before I knew the finesse of things.
I love it.
To navigate this at the time. I've always had a stubborn streak in terms of treating people as you want to be treated. And the one piece that I feel like that I had to really in that last 20 years have had plenty of opportunities to fine tune through a lot of scars, as you said, is how to communicate what it is I need from that person in a way that doesn't spray my anxiety and however I'm feeling all over them and project, but also respecting them, but also respecting myself. So that's an example. I'm just going to give you a bunch of examples that were.
Well, but can we just stop for a second on that? Because did that take courage from you, or were you just fearless?
Yes. Oh my God.
Like, screw you. You're not talking to me.
No, I was sweating. I had to go to the bathroom first and get up my nerve. I mean, I was terrified, but I was also so angry that I knew, because he had made me look bad. And I think in conflict, that's also often what happens, is that kind of our greatest fear is brought forward, whether it's getting fired, whether it's looking like an idiot, whether it's looking like you don't know what you're talking about. And that all comes down to respect, doesn't it? I mean, there are certain ways to navigate conflict. There are certain ways to talk to someone one-on-one. I was always taught in my younger years from my parents, when you have an issue, go to that person and resolve it. Not everybody in our culture today adheres to that, and not everybody's taught that. And frankly, conflict resolution and management and navigation as a whole is something that all of us should be taught from our youngest years. But our models are, of course, imperfect parents and then imperfect teachers. And then we get into the workplace and we're kind of thrown into, with all of the baggage of our own individual past, with everybody else with their baggage. And what happens is you kind of turn into a bunch of second graders at the boardroom table, right? Throwing bombs here and they're, hitting one back to you. And then you're bringing in all this stuff that's happened in your morning, such as kids that were screaming at you on the way to school or refusing to do their homework in the next room during the pandemic, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We bring all that to the table.
Yeah. And, we're taught to be nice, the nice thing. I mean, I could do a whole episode on being nice.
Oh, gosh. Me too. I'm from the South. Me too.
Okay. Yeah.
That could be a whole different, that could be a book, Alan.
One of my husband's favorite quotes is a Morrissey line. I've spent a lifetime in ruins because of people who are nice. So it can be that sort of toxic positivity that we're sort of ingrained with can then stop us from actually tackling legitimate abuse, frankly. I mean, that was abuse that you went through in that moment, right?
Yeah. Can I give you another example?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. So I know you very kindly told me that before this you had purchased my last book, which was published 4 years ago. And it is the story of when I was the sole female executive on the world's largest real estate project at the time, for 6 years in Panama. In that role, I was unfortunately in the first 2 to 3 years of it caught between two men who despised each other, frankly, and used me and my role, because I had responsibility to both of them, as kind of a tennis ball. This guy didn't like what this guy did, so he would tell me to do this. The other guy would say, no, forget what he's saying. And then they wouldn't talk. So I became the person that had to try to bridge. And it was very, very difficult. One in particular of them that I answered to for half of that 6 years, was what I call a screamer, or a yeller. And his MO was to demean people and demand things and be pretty nasty, frankly. In today's world, it wouldn't be tolerated, but we were in a developing nation.
Yeah.
And, things are not, I had come out of the Denver market going to that. So I had expectations of being supported, having platforms in place and protections, and there was none of that. So I really had to learn how to navigate on my own. So that was where I really felt like at the end of it, I had gotten my master's, and I wrote about it a lot in that book, which is called Dream Job: Shattering the Glass Ceiling Comes at a Price.
On Amazon, everybody.
Yeah. It's actually not in, well, there's a few copies left. I fired my publisher, which is another story, because they were doing a crappy job. But yeah. But the point of that story is to say that, going back to what I said, the wisdom you didn't ask for, which is when you learn how to navigate those most difficult situations in your work life, the flip side is if you don't cultivate your own skills, you're the one who pays the price. It may be that you have employees under you that are also suffering from that same, but ultimately you are the one that has to take control of your setting. Now we'll talk about toxic workplace and all that stuff in a moment. But I felt like in my experience, I got to a point literally, and I feel like I'm pretty good at most of this. And it wasn't like I was young. In fact, at the time, I was already almost 40 at that point. So it wasn't like I was, straight out of school. It was so difficult and so toxic that after that had gotten to a point that I was ready to quit. And this was my dream job. I moved, to Panama. I was making tons of money. I'd moved my spouse with me. It would have been a nightmare for me to quit. Yeah. And somehow, kismet and universe and all that stuff, this person came into my life, this man, in a chamber kind of setting. And I got to know him, and he built trust with me. And he was an executive coach. And I thought, I don't need a coach. I need someone just to hit this guy in the head so he'll go away. And let's be honest, that never happens. So it ended up that I got to a point, frankly, of somewhat of workplace desperation. And I called him and said, I guess I do need help. I didn't think I did. I kind of felt like I had it all figured out. But as a result of my workplace life being a nightmare, everything else in my life is now falling apart because I'm bringing all that stress home. My relationship with my husband is a nightmare now too. I can't sleep. I'm stressed to the max. So it got to a point that I realized I had to do something for me. And what that looked like was hiring what ended up being, I thought it was a business coach. It ended up being as much a life coach, because as you said, it comes back to beliefs, values, and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, this message is so important for people to hear, and this is why I wanted you to come, JuliAnne, because you can end up feeling very resentful that you have to, let's face it, deal with the asshole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
You can feel very resentful, angry about that. It's not right. No, it's not right. It's not okay not to get all Whitney on your asses. But you know what I'm saying, right? It's like it's not okay. And but the thing is that if you can't change that environment, you can't change the person. You either change yourself or you take yourself out of the situation.
That's right.
Sometimes taking yourself out of the situation is not an option.
Right.
For whatever reason, financial or practical or otherwise. And so your only option left is to develop skill, self-confidence, self-respect, and sort of get it back, right? And this is why boundaries are so important.
Yes.
So that you can protect yourself and your self-respect. Because if you don't respect yourself, then other people will not either, right? Mm-hmm. And what is tolerated then ends up continuing. And this is what was happening to you, it seems. And good for you that you recognize that. I mean, it takes a lot of self-awareness and courage, I think, to recognize that, whether it's in hindsight, whether it's in the moment, highly skilled if it's in the moment, right? Because that's when you have really done the work to be mindful and present and understand how your emotions are affecting you.
Mm-hmm. It does take a huge dose of humility. But as I said, I had exhausted every way that I knew how that had worked for me in the past, and none of it had worked. And so at that point, I'm a Taurus, so I tend to be pretty stubborn, a bit fixed in my ways. But even I, at that point, the door to me of being able to leave with my big girl pants on wasn't an option. I could have done it, yes. And would I do things even now, 10 years later differently? You bet. But at the time, I had exhausted everything I knew. And that's when I finally got to the point of, literally, I felt like my life was disintegrating around me. Yeah. And I didn't feel, a large part of me was very angry and wanted to blame. But the first question this guy asked me, the coach, when we started working together, was, well, have you told this guy what you expect from him, how to treat you? Have you informed him, educated him? And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, don't people just know this stuff? Like, you don't yell in the office and you don't demean people and you don't XYZ. And he said, well, it's your responsibility to set your boundaries. You can't just expect his boundaries to work for you, or whatever, in the culture you've dealt with in the past to be in this culture. And I was like, oh, I'd never thought of that.
Okay, so can we just
please
hold on that for a sec? Because and to be clear, I do not think that what you're saying is that absolves him of his responsibility.
No.
Right?
I'm not saying that.
What you're saying is that you also have the responsibility, if you need to stay in relationship with that person, to set your limits and your boundaries so that you can stay sane, you can you can function, and so that it doesn't affect you in such a way that it is affecting your relationships and your sense of well-being and your sleep. I mean, I've been through that too, to a point where I was working on a project, and one day I came home, and it was awful because I was working with somebody who was just really toxic, a client. And one day my husband said to me, I'd like my husband back, please. Because he could see what it was doing to me. And that was it. Like, I went back and I drew those boundaries the next day, and it was fine from that point forward. Yeah. But you have to do it sometimes, right?
Well, I think another thing that we do, or a thing that I had done in that scenario and in some others, is I had assumed that they, coming from the same culture as me, had the same kind of values for how he would be treating other people that he worked with that I did.
So how does that line up with your view that of assuming positive intent, right? How does that line up for you, right? Because you're saying there's a different value system there. And I'm just curious about
Right.
how do you reconcile that? How do you know when somebody does have good intent versus somebody actually just kind of maybe manipulating and trying to get their own way?
Right. Well, we all know there's a lot of manipulation happening in our world, and there always has been. It just has looked different ways. It's more overt now, I think, than in the past. Back to your question of balancing, and in that situation, my assumption that people are good, have good intentions, because I do. That's always been kind of my baseline. What I've learned is that at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding, right? If you go into a scenario, a work scenario in this case, and the person is treating you poorly over and over and over again, the first thing to look at is, are they treating other people like this? Or is it just me? Right? To look at that from kind of the 20,000 foot view versus the 5,000, which is just me and that person. So that's one thing. If they are, then clearly it's not about you, it's about them. Which rolls into another recommendation I would make, which is, and this is very difficult, Alan, and it's taken me years to really get this. And I feel like now this is one of the reasons I feel like I have my master's in conflict. And that is, don't take it personally. Now, that's really easy to say, really easy to say.
So,
and in fact, when the coach that I worked with said that to me, I looked at him and laughed. Like, how can I not take it personally? This guy's being a complete jerk in everything. Calling me about stupid things and yelling again. And he said, but is he doing that to everyone else? And when I backed up, kind of literally rolled back in my chair and looked at started observing, I was like, wow, he is doing it to everyone else. But I've been so myopic and immersed in my own thing, which all of us tend to do. I hadn't seen it. So that helped me to start steering my ship, turn it a little bit differently, turn my rudder, if you will, like a boat, to the viewpoint, the perspective of, this really is about him. It's not about me. Now, am I still going to put up with bad behavior? No. So how do I now then, as Catherine said, it's difficult sometimes to establish your boundaries and God to enforce them. But then you have to have some tough conversations. And then you have to be willing at the end of those conversations, and then the proof in the pudding that continues to happen. Am I willing to continue to put up with bad behavior? It's kind of, I don't want to make this sound too simplistic, but once you set the boundaries, sometimes, especially if the behavior has been going on for years, which often in workplace settings it has, you have to kind of remind, like, okay, reminder, we made an agreement that that's not going to happen. This is not going to happen anymore. So I'll give you an example. This gentleman, well, it's not a gentleman, but this man, we had this conversation. We agreed to new methods of how we would deal with each other. The next time he called me yelling, I said, hey, I'm going to call him Jack. Hey, Jack, remember that conversation we had? And we agreed that this is not going to happen any longer. And you're no longer going to yell at me on the phone. So I'm now going to hang up. When you cool off, you're welcome to call me and we can have a conversation. And I hung up. I mean, literally I had to walk outside and like splash cold water on my face because I was so proud of myself, but terrified. This was my boss.
Gosh. I mean, just hearing that, I'm sure there are people who like hear you tell that story and just go, like, it just, because it takes such courage in the moment to do that and to stand up and say, no, not today. You are not having me. That is not okay. Hard line in the sand.
Right. And there are going to be feelings that what I learned about myself is there are feelings that came up that made that. I mean, I felt like my voice was shaking, which clearly in a work setting we don't want to do, right? It shows fear. I had to really, in that moment, like remind myself, no, JuliAnne, we are doing this. Like we had the conversation. Now, if you haven't had the conversation, it's harder to go in and say, look, dude, you're not going to treat me like that.
Yeah.
Because you haven't established a baseline in the relationship.
You got to teach people how to treat you.
You know what? It all comes to education, doesn't it? Right?
It really
when
does.
Vivian's saying, how I wish we didn't have to teach people how to treat us, but we do. And I completely agree. That went back to, Vivian, for me, that example of I had assumed that this guy and everyone else had the same set of values and beliefs as me. He didn't. And he showed up in ways that were just, frankly, horrific in the workplace.
So, question, JuliAnne.
Yeah.
Was he treating the men and the women differently?
Okay, let me think about that. No, it's the same.
Okay. So this was just a equal opportunity jerk.
Yeah.
Equal offender. Right. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
But I know that you work a lot with women,
I
right?
do.
I know that you work not exclusively, but a lot with women.
Yes.
And you help a lot of women in various different ways through whether it's through conflict or kind of coaching them and through your work with survivors of breast cancer as well. So tell us a little bit about that and sort of that how what you've learned is helpful to women in particular.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question. A lot of what I end up talking about, okay, let me back up. There's always, when working with my own gender, clearly, there's always certain aspects that it's kind of like guys in the locker room, right? When it's just women, we have certain conversations that we don't have with anybody else because there's a resonance.
Yeah.
It's like going to a female doctor to get your parts looked at. You probably as a woman, that might be of interest to you. It might not. Same for a man. So I'm able to have conversations with them based on my experiences, but also being able to come in as a 20,000, viewpoint perspective and see things that they're not seeing, see things from a viewpoint that they can't see it because they're immersed in it. And all of us have this challenge that when we're in the weeds, we can't see the forest for the trees, even though we're right in the middle of 10 trees, we just can't see it. And of course, the old adage, as anytime there's a conflict, emotion goes up, cognition, the brain goes down. And so often I'm able to really point out different things like, have you thought about this? Have you, here's what I see. And then from that, we can just tweak things to help, them go back into whatever the scenario is, and hopefully try different things.
Yeah.
That's a lot of the work that I do.
And do you find that you're helping them with confidence, boundaries, conflict resolution a lot? Like, is that?
Yes, all of the above. And I want to clarify, I do not represent myself as a coach.
No, I know.
Honestly, because that's not my training. I'm a true consultant. But this work comes out in the work I do often because of what I find, even in the marketing work that I do with different groups. Often I find that there are barriers to moving forward on a project or moving forward to some initiative because of personalities or because of misunderstandings or communication that's not working. And so often that will turn into a scenario on the work side that when I have then a frank conversation, I will say I'm pretty open now at this point in my life and my career to just say, okay, can we have a frank conversation? Let's talk about what's really not working here.
Yeah.
And
sorry. Yeah, I think there's also a difference, isn't there? You kind of alluded to this earlier on, but I think there's also a difference between workplace conflict that is legitimately about, an issue, a difference of opinion on a strategy or, whatever it might be, right? That's normal. And that is a part of what we all have to deal with at work. Yeah. And legitimate and actually to be expected, and actually as long as you are skillful and the people around you are skillful, is healthy, right? For the organization, for your relationships, you're developing skill as you do that. Then there's toxicity, which is narcissism, bullying, over kind of people playing politics, nasty behavior, throwing people under the bus, all of those things that we have experienced at some point, in our careers. And these are quite different things. And I think I don't know about you, but in my view, handling those things is also different, right? Because one is about standing up for yourself and not letting people kind of push you around, or throw you under the bus or whatever it is. And the other is about kind of really saying, all right, how do I stay in relationship? How do I make sure that I'm not kind of dropping into secondary emotion and maybe being angry about something that I'm actually afraid of? How do I advocate for solutions and common ground? And how do I pick my words and choose my words carefully so that I'm inviting this person into a conversation rather than, shutting them down? So I think, you're not going to use that technique necessarily with people who are just bullying you, right? That's different.
Yeah, there's no one size fits all. That's
Right.
the reality. I think intuitively, many of us going into a scenario, or especially if we've been somewhere for a while and we've seen again and experienced one thing after another, I always like to give people one chance at least at having a conversation and frankly asking them. Like, I have some observations. I would like, even to say, this was the beginning conversation I had with the guy that I referenced a moment ago. I'm really interested in making sure we can work better together. Is that something you're interested in? Could we have a conversation? Because I have some observations. I'd like you to bring your observations and let's talk. And then set a time and a date to do so. I think if you give people that initial opportunity, it may end very badly, but at least you've done everything you could. You've exhausted, and you can't just say, well, they should XYZ. You've done what you can. Now, there are times in a workplace setting, especially if it's an environment that's not supportive of you and frankly of other people, that's never going to work because you're not going to be supported.
Right.
And I had there's another example of another workplace I was in, kind of in between the two that I mentioned. And out of nothing that I did and of nothing my employee did, we had an email that came in from one of the builders we were working with on a huge project that, in response to a request for a newsletter type thing, that made some crazy, horrific, not accusations, but observations about myself and my employee that were defamatory. Like, I could have taken him to an attorney and sued someone. And he was an executive vice president of a home builder.
Okay.
This guy knew better. But it turned in, because I then turned into Mama Bear, not about me, but about my employee. Neither of us had done anything wrong. But unfortunately, the setting in that work environment turned into, I called HR. I had to go to my boss, who's the CEO. He kind of said, you guys just need to work it out. I was like, no, I don't think so. And I'll be calling HR now. They came all the way from, another state, weren't particularly helpful. I ultimately made the choice to leave because it was not a supportive environment for me. I mean, and I'd done very well there and had great, success, but I didn't feel that if I wasn't supported ultimately long term, and there were others in the organization who then rallied on the other side because they liked the guy. And I was like, no, no, that's just not okay. So at some point you often have to make hard decisions.
Absolutely. I get so angry about this one because there are so many women, especially, people of color, people who are minorities of in organizations all over that are telegraphing to people in power, there's toxicity here, there's a problem here, there's a problem here, there's a problem here. And there are then people in power who basically just, oh, he didn't mean it. Oh, he's a good guy, really, right? Yeah. Because they're making money for the company. It's like the brilliant jerk syndrome, right? And they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with it, and so they just let the problem fester in the arms of the person who's suffering, other people, who are suffering. And I just don't think people are going to get away with that. I hope that people are not going to get away with that for much longer, because it is so damaging to people's mental health, to your organization, to your reputation as a leader. Like, step up, deal with it, right? I mean,
but again, going back to, and I completely concur with everything you said. One thing, just a little note to add in there. It all comes down to, do you see how one person can make that call? Do you see, if the CEO had said, wow, JuliAnne, this is really bad, and I'm going to deal with it right now, and I'm going to call in that other female senior VP right now. I was a VP, and we're going to resolve this, because she was going to bat for the guy outside the company who'd done all this. And she had come in and tried to tell me to build a bridge and all this other crap. And I was like, what? Get out of my office. That doesn't even make sense. But if he had said, come in, let's talk about it. Let's resolve it right now. There's no need to call HR. Let's just boom, boom, boom. But he didn't have, frankly, the balls to do so. No. He was choosing to hide behind whatever. And, sadly, yeah. As you say, that permeates a lot of companies, and it's tragic.
It is, and you will lose people if you don't have, and it's a lack of courage. It's a lack of courage.
Absolutely.
You have, if you are going to be a CEO, if you're going to be a leader, you have to have courage. The kind of courage that you were talking about at the very beginning of this conversation, where it's like, it is not okay to treat me like that. Do not treat me like that. That is not okay. You know, it may take your breath away to have to go do it, but right, we need more of that, I think, in organizations, especially when there are problematic people around. Wow, JuliAnne, you've had.
Let's all take a deep breath. Yeah, it's heavy stuff. And when you're living it, it is really difficult to, again, see beyond right here, because you're immersed and it's just really hard. It impacts everything. And
you deserve peace at work. You deserve respect and peace at work.
How many of us have said, I've said this so many times, and it's just, can we all just do our jobs?
Yeah.
And not the politics and not this and that and the sniping and throwing little bombs over here. I mean, can we just do our jobs?
Yeah, exactly. You know, Christy made a great comment. It's a little big to put up on the screen probably, but I just want to acknowledge, here we go. Christy, right, from an early age, never judge someone else by your own morals. It really is a shame that you got to teach others, especially leaders, about boundaries.
Absolutely. Hey, Christy, I'm so glad you joined us.
Yeah. Thanks for joining, Christy.
Absolutely true.
And we have Vivian's here. Thanks for joining us, Vivian. I know Elizabeth's here. Anjali, David Brown. Hi. We've got some great comments going. Thank you for joining us, everybody. So, okay. What do you consider to be your biggest lesson from your career when it comes to conflict? Like, if we think about, like, what is it that you want people to walk away with from this conversation? Like, what's the the final word, if you like? We're going to play a game to finish, but like, maybe what's the final word that you want?
I'm thinking as you're talking. Okay, so I would say not just one. It's like two or three. Is that okay?
Great.
Number one, focus on what you need from the situation. Like, what's the big picture of what you need out of this? Now, that's complicated, so that's a big picture. Write it all down, etc. Get someone to support you, not a friend. If it's work related, they will be jaded your direction, and that does not serve you. So whether it's a therapist or a counselor or a coach, you need someone that's objective, that's not immersed and already too much at your side to bat. They say feel the fear and do it anyway. That's I think the hardest piece. And then frankly, go in prepared. You got to prepare yourself. I think it's unrealistic. I had expectations of myself to be able to manage all this kind of stuff, and no one had ever trained me. Frankly, I had horrible examples in my parents. God love them. They just weren't good at this type of thing. So where else was I going to get it? Why did I assume that just because I went through college and had a degree and had success in my own culture, and then going to another, why would I think I would be good at that when everybody else had totally different backgrounds they were bringing to the table?
Yeah.
So going in prepared, and if a part of that is getting yourself a coach, especially, then it's to your advantage.
Yeah. And, I have to say that is really brilliant advice. And I think what's encouraging to me is when I see younger people now in the workplace are drawing their boundaries. They're saying, no, that's not okay with me. And no, I'm not going to tolerate that. And no, you can't have me for 15 hours a day. I mean, they're really, they have, a lot of them have learned some of the, the lessons that, the Gen Xers and, and the boomers amongst us. Right. I mean, it seems to, with that, I'm encouraged that is being passed down, it seems. But there's a lot of leaders who don't know what the hell to do with that. They're like, what do you mean? No. They're having trouble with that boundary setting, and they're calling it entitled.
Our Gen X, and baby boomers is another thing, but Gen X, we did whatever we had to get what we wanted,
Right.
And these younger generations are, and kudos to them. And frankly, many of them had Gen X parents who had somehow figured it out and passed that along as a baseline. So that's amazing.
Yeah. And there's been a big focus on, I don't want to kind of, go down this topic necessarily because it's a subject of its own, but there's been so much focus on mental health over the last couple of years with everything that we've been through with, the pandemic and the war and the racial reckoning and all the personal things that people have been through, in their own families and the impact, of the pandemic. And I think we're at an inflection point that is a little bit of a battle going on for work from home, return to office versus hybrid, and boundaries around work and family and personal time. And it's really interesting to me what's happening right now, and I think there's a lot of conflict. So everything that you're saying, I think, is really relevant, for anyone who's grappling with that. And being really clear about what is your bottom line, what is it that you will not accept, what are your limits, and being clear about that is really important if you're going to navigate conflict successfully.
Completely, 100%.
I love Elizabeth's comment. We have to put this up. So Elizabeth's comment. Elizabeth and I work together. Elizabeth is also a cancer survivor and a total badass, and I absolutely love her. Hi, Elizabeth. I had one experience like that. I left as well. It's the same. Disappointing for me. I'd made a lot of money for the company. HR and CEO said, "This too shall pass." And I was like, "Yep, I will pass on this job." Good for you.
And I will pass.
Right.
Good job. Absolutely.
Right. You two need to know each other. You could probably run a master class together.
Love that.
I would certainly buy a ticket. Okay, can we have some fun for a minute? Just kind of like,
yeah, let's do it.
So,
is this where you cue the music and we all dance to mariachis or something?
No music.
Oh,
we're dance.
darn.
All right. So a new thing we're doing. So complete the sentence. I am.
Gosh, well, relevant to this conversation, I am powerful. It took me a long time to find that in myself, but I now know that I am.
Yes, you are. I am not.
Are we keeping it are we really trying to have fun? Okay. I am not. Because I'm thinking, I'm so in this vein of like conflict and managing and navigating. In relevant to that, I'm not a wuss. I could say that also from being a cancer survivor. Yeah, that's good. I'm not a wuss. What are you doing this too, or is it just me?
No, you're doing it.
Okay.
Because we're going to run out of time. You can see me next week. I want to be.
I just want to be me at this point in my life, Alan. That's it.
Yeah, good for you. And I never want to be
something I'm not.
I don't think you ever will be.
Not anymore.
Yeah. I love how you show up, Julianne. And I know that you also, just give a minute, I know that you also work with women who have survived and aiming to thrive from breast cancer. Can you just say a little bit about that? Because I think it's such an important part of your work.
Yeah, that's not a paying thing. I have a Facebook page. I have a blog on my website. And really, it's mostly about sharing resources and insight and just helping women where they are, whether it's from initial diagnosis and the shock of that to the grief of, if it's breast cancer or going through a mastectomy like I did. It's really just about sharing. As you briefly, I don't think we did it on this. I went through a near-death experience, and that changed everything for me. And I know that a part of the reason I'm still here is to be able to give back to women that have gone through what I've gone through.
Well, let's talk about how people can reach you, because I know that people are going to want to reach you after this conversation, Julianne. So let's just kind of give people your information. You want to speak briefly to this?
You're welcome to find me through my website. I'm not on Twitter, but I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I do have a YouTube as well. So any of those, frankly, do come to me directly. Website's probably the easiest, and LinkedIn is fine as well. So either one of those, since we're, this is more of a business setting, send me a message. I respond to every LinkedIn message as long as it's not a spam message. If it's spam, I don't respond.
No. And no brilliant jerks in your feed. Thank you very much. And I know that you follow me taking down some of those folks as well on LinkedIn. Julianne, thank you.
Alan, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I love your work. I'm a huge supporter of it, and it's just a real pleasure. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate all your support there. That's it. We're out of time, everybody. I will see you next week. Wasn't JuliAnne just awesome? Make sure that you connect with her on LinkedIn and follow her and check out her work. She's absolutely brilliant, and I'm so grateful she was here. Follow us too, of course. Wisdom You Didn't Ask For, hashtag WYDAF anywhere. You can just find us. You can follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and we're even starting the Talk Tick or whatever it's called. I don't know. I'll see you next week.